Everyone, please follow me. Nice and quick. 起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位的同时一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。
And good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever it is you happen to be at the moment. It's 1:30 in the afternoon on an absolutely beautiful, warm, sunny Sunday in Indianapolis. It's a great day to be alive. It's a great day to be sharing in this process of studying and understanding the Tao teachings. This morning, well, actually yesterday morning is when this started. My wife asked me to talk about patience, something that I decidedly lack on occasions. And I really was having a tough time coming up with anything that specifically addressed patience as a topic. But in the process of looking around, I did find something that struck me this time around as remarkably profound. This is a famous and infamous verse in the Tao Te Ching, if you will. It's the chapter containing the phrase that's most often mistranslated as the uncarved block. and we're going to eventually be talking about that a bit. That would be chapter 28 of the Tao Te Ching. I labeled this discussion Attaining Tao because it occurs to me that virtually everything a person needs to know and understand to begin to achieve oneness with the Tao itself is contained in this chapter. But as with so many of the teachings in the Tao Te Ching, and with so many of the practices in cultivating those teachings, it's always much easier said than done to gain real mastery over those disciplines. And so these are all things that most of us probably wrestle with and do our best to try to bend our wills to. Chapter 28 starts out by saying, know the masculine, hold to the feminine, be the watercourse of the world. Being the watercourse of the world, the eternal virtue does not depart. Return to the state of the infant. Know the white, hold to the black. Be the standard of the world. Being the standard of the world, the eternal virtue does not deviate. It goes on to say, return to the state of the boundless. Know the honor, hold to the humility. Be the valley of the world. Being the valley of the world, the eternal virtue shall be sufficient. Return to the state of plain wood. Plain wood splits, then becomes tools. The sages utilize them and then become leaders. Thus the greater whole is undivided. And these 4 short paragraphs tell us essentially everything that we need to know in order to begin to attain oneness with the Tao, to be able to begin to truly live life skillfully and smoothly. And it's broken down into a couple of reasonably easy to get our heads around statements and concepts. First of all, it deals with yin and yang. And it absolutely does. Without using the 2 words, it deals absolutely with yin and yang. Okay? Masculine and feminine, white and black, honor and humility. Right? Those are all complementary pairs. And one of the biggest things to understand about yin and yang is that they are not diametrically opposed opposites. That opposition is a myth created very largely in the West by people who don't understand what the yin and yang are. Originally, the yin and yang were not a flat circle, but rather were represented by a sphere that uncoiled into a plethora of elements, solar and lunar cycles, and all sorts of other things that were the underpinnings of these teachings. The circular representation of the yin and yang came along much, much later. But for our purposes, we can still use that circular representation for our purposes and understanding. Yin and yang exist on either side of an S-shaped line in that circular representation. That S-shaped line is interaction, it's movement, it's motion. Okay? It is not the energies in and of themselves that cause things to happen. Static energy simply is static energy. It is the motion, the flow between the two energies that cause all of the myriad things that we know and see. The other thing notable about that representation is that within each of the two sides of the yin and yang, there's a little tiny piece of the other. There is no pure yin nor pure yang. Okay? Within all yin, there is some yang. Within all yang, there is some yin. And that's important. Okay? For the purposes of our discussion, we need to understand that what we're dealing with is complementary pairing and not opposition. Okay? And so, Lao Tzu admonishes us to know, to understand the masculine, but to hold to the feminine principle. To know the white, but to hold to the black. This is a reference to perhaps the differences between splendor and finery and that which is lowly and humble. The two different color schemes. I found that reference not in secular research, believe it or not, but on the World Iguandao website. Honor and humility. Honor not in terms of integrity and doing what's right, perhaps, but honor in terms of position and status, being one who is honored, as opposed to being one who is humble and out of the limelight. Okay? All of those things exist in sort of a complementary circle. One can move from one side to the other very easily simply by using the flow of the energies. And this is not the only place in the Tao Te Ching where Lao Tzu tells us to hold to the feminine principle. In chapter 6, he talks about the root of the valley being the mystic feminine principle, the yin principle. Okay? There are other verses where he admonishes us to hold to that feminine principle. We'll talk more about why in a minute or two. The other thing that we see in this chapter that's noteworthy is the natural state, the original nature, the representation of the true self in this chapter, right? The returning to the state of the plain wood, the references to the greater whole that remains undivided. Now, those are things that as we go through the various paragraphs, we encounter over and over and over again as being pointers to that return to the natural state, the elevation of the true self, that part within us that Derek is fond of calling the Buddha within. And in my case, owing to my rather portly appearance, perhaps the Buddha who's emerging. I tickle myself sometimes. And along with the natural state, we have the other states of being, the things that we're admonished to do, to be the watercourse of the world, the standard of the world, the valley of the world. Notably, this is the second time that I can recall right off the top of my head where we see this reference to the valley. Okay, chapter 6 being the first one. Then he talks about the eternal virtue. This is the virtue that never changes. This is the virtue of the Tao. This is the virtue of attaining Tao. This is not the virtue of society, the contrived artificial or virtue or the virtue imposed by the rule of law. This is the virtue of the Tao itself. It is the virtue that does not depart if we're the watercourse for the world, that does not deviate when we become the standard of the world, that is sufficient when we are the valley for the world. In order for us to adopt those three roles, though, we have a matter of some unlearning to do. Okay? In the West, we tend to see yin and yang, once again, in terms of opposition, which begs the question, which is greater, the masculine or the feminine principle, the white or the black, the honor or the humility, yin or yang? Which is better for us? Which will we choose to embrace? What will we choose to exemplify? And how do we know? Well, if we listen, it is a strong preference and suggestion on Lao-Tzu's part that we adopt that yin principle in all things. As a matter of fact, in this chapter, Lao-Tzu would say that the sages value the yin principle more than the yang. It's not that the yang principle doesn't exist or isn't important, but in terms of living life, in terms of getting through our day in a joyful, peaceful, smooth, and frictionless manner, it is the yin principle that causes that to happen more often than not. Because the yin principle is softer, more yielding, more passive, somewhat darker, if you will. And that's not dark in the sense that we would apply it to a vampire movie or something. It simply is not as active or as visible, perhaps. It is more flexible. It is more still, more receptive than the yang principle, which tends to be more moving, more active. Some might say assertive or stronger or less yielding. And so for us, in society, in our relationships, in our dealings with other people, that yin principle becomes very important. We will encounter many people in our lives for whom the yang principle is a way of life. I have been one of those people. And so they're going to be assertive, forceful, unyielding, inflexible, rigid. Okay? It is the soft, yielding, passive yin principle that overcomes that hardness every time. Additionally, we're being admonished here to return to the true self, the natural state, our real nature at birth, that mindset and philosophical nature, if you will, unblemished by what the world does to us from the time we're born until we fortunately encounter these teachings. It's a state of plainness and simplicity and utility. It's a state of humility and of honesty and integrity and virtue that transcends what can be done with the mere words of people or the mere laws of government. This is a natural state that flows deeply from within those who cultivate the Tao teachings. Pardon me. And so to kind of move things along here, to attain Tao from my perspective and in my humble opinion at the moment is to nurture all things, to become the watercourse for the world. What does a watercourse do? It brings water from one place to another, to some place where it can be collected and distributed and utilized. And water, as we all know, is the very stuff of life. Without water, everything on this planet dies. So to be the watercourse is an incredibly important thing to be. To attain Tao is to live in that natural state. It is to become the infant that we were in our hearts and our minds, while still understanding the adult level workings of the world, right? Pardon. It is to get closer and closer and closer to the emergence of the true self, the real awakening, the enlightenment that we all seek. That's what Lao Tzu means. It is to set the right example, to be the standard for the world. So it means that we watch what we do, we watch what we say, we pay attention to the teachings and how it is that we use them. And when I say that we watch what we do and what we say, that doesn't mean censorship of what we do and what we say. It means that at all times we should be looking to lift others up, to bring out in others their highest and best good, not by force or contrivance or manipulation, but naturally. It is to hold on to humility. It's to become the valley for the world. It is to hold on to that mystic feminine principle that when it's used, it is never exhausted. Goes back to chapter 6 again. It is to live skillfully, to lead wisely, and not to control or lord over others using those skills and that wisdom. It's to use the tools that are created from the plain wood to gain utility and usefulness without dividing the greater whole. And for myself, it is to help others attain Tao, to help other people understand as best as I can some concepts and teachings that here in the West are still rather foreign and somewhat indigestible, that sometimes take a lot of work to fathom and to understand and a lot more work to master. I think we can probably get through the next slide here. And so the closer we get to being able to attain Tao, the closer that we get to that oneness, the more selfless we're going to become, the more patient we become, the more yin we become. Interestingly enough, we'll become less and less intellectual. We'll live much less in the mind space and much more in the heart space. But we will become more and more wise and skillful about how we live and what we do. And by doing that, we'll set a better example for all those around us. Those things are all worthy goals. And by doing them, not only do we bring ourselves closer to oneness with the Tao, but we help other people learn how to follow those footsteps. Those things are important, both for us and for them. For those who have the karmic affinity, but not the knowledge of where to go to gain the education, what we do might make the difference between somebody finding that true self within them and maybe not finding it. So to kind of wrap this up, for me, once again, my humble opinion only, to attain the Tao is to unlearn what the world's taught us, which is a big enough job all by itself, and to learn the greater truths that simplicity and plainness and selflessness and emptiness and utility are the things that are of real value, while the things of this world they're all illusions, they're all temporary vagaries of this existence, and none of them last. For me, once again, my opinion, attaining Tao means achieving a life lived skillfully, without friction and contention, without struggling with other people or anything or anyone else. It means mastering the teachings to the point where life runs the way that it should, without me feeling like I'm rowing the Queen Mary into port. It's a joyous, peaceful life without a lot of friction and contention, without fighting and debating, and without some of the struggles that we all go through on a fairly regular basis. I'm not naive enough to think that I won't ever have a degree of misfortune or a problem now and again. But by utilizing the teachings, the magnitude of those things hopefully becomes significantly smaller. Attaining Tao means following in the footsteps of the sages who went before us, and our Tao older brothers and sisters who have gone down the path before us. Those are the tried and true paths that work, that produce the results. We can always choose, I guess, to forge our own path through uncharted territory, but that's going to add a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of effort. In some cases, where a process has been tried and proved for millennia. And having access to those people and a map of those footsteps helps us to get there sooner, to understand better, and to help others to get there as well. Thank you all very much. Believe it or not, we're going to hit the 20-minute mark. You all have a wonderful Sunday, and thank you so much for letting me share with you.